when the 49ers meet the Los Angeles Rams at Levi's Stadium on Thursday night. It will mark the first NFC West clash between two friends who are destined to become bitter rivals, and it's an example of the NFL's latest trend. 37-year-old Kyle Shanahan's 49ers will face off against 31-year-old Sean McVay's Rams in a matchup of the NFL's two youngest head coaches. The former co-workers will coach against each other as head coaches for the first time in one of the youngest head coaching matchups in the history of the league. To understand the significance of the matchup, you first have to know the history of the two coaches and how their football lives have been intertwined and tied to 49ers lore. Jimmy Gruden, John's father, worked with former 49ers general manager John McVay at Dayton in the late 1960s. The two remained friends when Gruden was a Dan Devine assistant at Notre Dame in the late 1970s. Jim advised Bill Walsh to just draft him in the 1979 draft. Him, Joe Montana. Jim went on to work for Walsh and McVay as a trusted 49er scout beginning in 1987. McVay and Walsh then gave Jim's 26-year-old son, John, his first NFL job when they hired him as a 49er special assistant in 1990. 8 years later, 34-year-old John Gruden was hired by Al Davis as the Raiders head coach. McVay was still the 49ers GM in 1992 when he hired Mike Shanahan as the team's offensive coordinator, and the two were integral to the team's last Super Bowl championship at the end of the 1994 season. John Gruden gave both Kyle and Sean their first NFL jobs with the Tampa Bay Bucs, hiring Kyle as his offensive quality control coordinator in 2004 and then hiring a 22-year-old Sean for a similar role in 2008. While in Tampa, McVay became Gruden's around-the-clock shadow and his digital translator. At this point, you're getting the gist. These two coaches have grown up around the game. It is and has been their family business for much of their lives. They're not Renaissance men, they're football men. In 2006, Kyle, who was a walk-on wide receiver at Duke, was named wide receiver coach for the Houston Texans. At 26, he was the NFL's youngest position coach. 2 years later, he became the youngest offensive coordinator in the league. McVay is currently the youngest head coach in NFL history. He admitted this week that the two have one key trait in common. "I think we're both similar in our passion for the game of football," said McVay. Sean clearly has great admiration for Kyle. "Once I got around Kyle, it takes you about 2 minutes to realize what a bright offensive mind he is," Sean said. "He's one of the guys that I respect as much as anybody in this business, and he's been a huge influence on my coaching career." Kyle said he wasn't surprised at all that Sean got a head coaching job at a young age. "No, I wasn't surprised. Sean is a real good guy. He works hard. He's been around football his whole life. I loved coaching with Sean. We started out. He was my quality control coach for a year, and then we made him my tight end coach. He was my tight end coach for 3 years. Sean and I are good friends. We've always had a good relationship. He deserves everything he's gotten, and he's doing a good job in LA right now." McVay thinks it's an advantage to have come from a football family. "I think any time that you're able to be around the game, what you realize is, and you might not have realized it at the time, but looking back on it, you kind of subconsciously pick things up. You realize how much you love the competitive atmosphere, being around the players and coaches, and those are things that Kyle and I have done our entire lives." While the two coaches have many similarities, they have built dramatically different staffs. Shanahan hired a young and relatively inexperienced defensive coordinator in Robert Saleh and has a very young and inexperienced staff overall, while McVay went with the wily old veteran Wade Phillips as his DC. Saleh is in his first year as an NFL defensive coordinator at the age of 38 and is the NFL's 9th youngest coordinator overall. McVay says he feels fortunate to be surrounded by experienced coaches. "We've got Wade Phillips, who's been a head coach. You don't feel like you've got to look over his shoulder with regards to him running the defense, and with John Fassel, he's one of the best at what he does. I think you always want to be in tune with what's going on, but when you've got such great coordinators running the special teams and on the defense, you can let them do their job.